Welcome, all you Sheehanites, to another very special episode of Sheehan is Dead Comics. I'll be interviewing Ram V. He is the most recent writer on Batman Detective Comics, and he is the newly announced writer for New Gods as part of DC's All-In initiative that kicks off next month. So, without further ado, we're going to have Ram on. And one more thing, if you would please like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. It makes a difference. So again, without further ado, here's Ram V. Hey.
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right.
So do you live in UK usually, or?
Yeah, I moved here in 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to live on the East Coast in the States. But I was studying to be a chemical engineer back then. And I worked as an engineer for about 5 or 6 years. Moved back to India for a while. Then I moved over here in 2014 or so. And then I've been here ever since.
Wow, a chemical engineer to a comic book writer. Hey, all
Yeah,
right.
logical shift in career.
Yeah, that's usually the way it goes, you know. So how did that come about, Ram?
I'd always been interested in writing since I was a kid. And I think my first attempts at writing were when I was probably 13, 14. I tried to write a terrible ripoff of Lord of the Rings, but yeah, I got pretty far into it. I wrote about 40,000 words or so. So even back then, like I had it in me to sit down and put a bunch of words down on paper, which is always a good start. And then, yeah, I was studying to be an engineer. My dad was an engineer, so it was kind of the expected thing to do. But I used to write lunch breaks when I traveled for work, even as a hobby. And Yeah, I'd always been sort of narratively, creatively inclined. And when 2013 came about, I felt like I don't want to be 60, 70, look back and go like, oh man, I wish I had pursued that other thing that somewhere deep down I knew I was good at. So yeah, I just quit chemical engineering, dove in both feet, started writing some stories. I had had a few things already published by then in terms of prose short stories. So that kind of led into me writing more prose. I moved to the UK to study creative writing. I wrote a novel as part of that. And the comics kind of happened tangentially at the time. One of my cousins, who was a filmmaker, said, "You have such a visual style. Have you tried writing some graphic novels?" And I went, "Yeah, I don't know why I haven't tried that. I love comics and graphic novels." And sort of late 80s, early 90s Vertigo had been my intro really to the sort of big American comics, if you will. And that had always been something that I had been interested in. I never thought of writing them until 2014, 2015 came about. I started putting a book called Black Mamba together. It was a story, it was an anthology collection of crime noir stories set in Mumbai, minus any actual crime. This is just existential, weird noir set in Mumbai, if you will. And that book kind of launched my career and opened a bunch of doors. And um, I'm happy to say, like a lot of people who I would consider as stalwarts of the industry kind of saw it and went, "Oh, you have a lot of potential. You should stick with it." So
Wow. That is fascinating. That is so cool. I love how you said you didn't want to become an old man and be like, "Oh, I could have done that."
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's super cool. I very much respect you for that. I very much respect you for that. Um,
yeah. Look,
I
I mean, I'm also lucky to be in a position where I could take those risks. A lot of people, are not in a position where they can take those risks or where they can just quit a job and start and hope that the other thing will work out. So yeah, I'm very thankful for my circumstances in life as well. Yeah.
that makes me think of Jim Lee, how his parents wanted him to be a doctor. And then
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah.
I want to draw comics. And they're like,
Jim told me
what?
that exact same story the first
Yeah.
time I told him about me switching from a chemical engineer. So
Yeah. Yeah. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a story. You and Jim are almost like kindred spirits when it comes to that. That's a very, very cool. Now, when you did that, were you engaged or married at that time, or were you still single? Or
Believe I had just been married for about a little over 2 years at that time.
okay, so did your
Um,
wife was your wife a champ about it, or was she like rolling
she
her eyes?
was. She's always been in a creative industry. She was a creative director at Ogilvy and McCann Erickson when we got married. So she had always known I had had this sort of creative inclination. And so she was the only one who was just like, if it makes you happy, do it.
Wow.
And everyone else was a bit worried in terms of like, what's happening? Why are you changing career tracks? But no, she was always super supportive.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, my initial thought is I would think, of course your parents are going to think you're a little crazy and your wife might think you're super crazy or vice versa. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, no, she was all for the craziness. So yeah.
I was reading this and I took the trade dress off
Hmm.
because I used to keep it on, but then I was told I was a monster for having the trade dress on my books. So I digress. Um, And I got to tell you, man, I didn't know any of your work. I didn't know anything about you. And I'm like, huh, what a provocative cover, number one. And then number two, this was my favorite page.
Hmm.
I was telling Scott on in one of our shows like a few months ago, I said Ram V writes Batman like I remember falling in love with Batman.
Hmm.
Please allow me to be redundant because obviously these came out of your brain. It says, these past nights, I have stalked Gotham shadows like a fog of fear over its quieted streets. I was like, the dread reminder that the specter that haunts their skies may choose to descend upon them at any moment. And then you show the guy here, Raphael drew this perfect, dropping the dude off the roof
Yeah.
and it says like the old days, and this made me think of that clip in of that panel in year one where he's like, I know pain and I share it with people like you.
Mm.
Says like the old days, I have asked questions under the threat of pain beyond imagination. And I was like this reading this for the first time. I was like, yes, Batman. I'm like, that's my Batman. And I have broken jaws and twisted arms and strung them up and hung them upside down from the high places. But they will say nothing. And then you've got this panel here where Batman tells the guy, speak while you still can. And just the look of dread in the guy's eyes, the way Raphael drew it, it made me. Have you ever played like Arkham City or your kids play it, or are you familiar?
Yeah, yeah. I played all the video games. Yeah.
Okay. So that reminded me of Kevin Conroy, like
Mm.
telling a guy, talk, and then he breaks his arm, and you get like a knockout on that.
Yeah, yeah.
That that was like I was so in love with those two pages. I read them over and over when I first read this. And I've heard you on another podcast on the comic book couples with Brad and Lisa, and you spoke about My Batman, and we all seem to have My Batman. Like I just told you, I
Yeah.
geeked out on that.
Yeah.
With your interesting background and the way you grew up and whatnot, when did you discover Batman? And when did you discover your Batman? Like that's the Batman that I rock with.
I think my first memory of anything Batman related actually the Tim Burton film, the original Tim Burton Batman film. Um, but I had watched it and I was enamored and it was great, but it wasn't really my Batman yet because cool, it was great. I enjoyed it. I thought it was amazing to have this sort of live action Batman character. I've read a few comics here and there,
Okay.
but only really became my Batman through the animated series. They used to have reruns of the animated series on at I think 4 p.m. or something like that every day. And so it would coincide perfectly with when I returned home from school. And so it would be the first thing. I'd drop my bags off, grab something to eat, sit down in front of the TV, and then watch the animated series to a point where I actually own one of the cells from Heart of Ice, the
Oh
second
man, I'm so
episode.
jealous, dude. Okay, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and it's the reason Freeze is my favorite villain. Um, I hear Conroy's voice when I'm writing Batman. I can't remember who voiced Freeze, but I speak Freeze's lines in that voice
That's so
when I'm
awesome.
trying to write it. So it's very much that. But obviously, I don't think it's written quite like the cadence from the show. Um,
If I still had tears to shed, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then he's got that weird sort of reverb on his voice too. So it's almost like something like, he goes, I might understand fear if I could feel it yet, Batman.
Yes.
There's these like
Yeah.
weird
Yeah.
pauses in
Yes.
between. It's like a really threatening Christopher Walken too. So
Yeah.
and really
The-
monotone as well. Like the whole sense that he feels no emotion anymore is really transmitted through his voice, which is great. Um, there's definitely parts in the outlaw arc in Detective where he's drawn by Jason Sean Alexander, where I think those were some of my favorite Freeze lines to write. Yeah,
well,
there's a line in there. There's a line in there where he says, "The cold takes what it will," which is lovely. Yeah.
chilly like that. I love that you did the imitation because I was going to be like, oh, can you do one? Being you hear it, so that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I was trying not to overdo it. I'm pretty decent with voice acting and voice modulation as well. So
That's cool. So Batman from the Burton film was your Batman,
no, that
and
was my first
that
Batman, but
was
the animated series was probably the most influential of
influential.
my
Okay,
Batman.
all right. And like you said, up when you saw the first movie, you had read a few comics, or was that
Yeah,
after the movie?
maybe a couple, because I would have relatives who would travel abroad, and every once in a while they had these collected digests in airport shops, and so they would bring back these digests, which was just like random issues from the middle of some run that I would read. Um, but yeah, I'd never read beyond that until it was weird. I was telling one of my editors this the first time I properly remember reading a Batman comic or reading Batman in a comic is actually the issue of Sandman where he shows up with John Constantine where
Oh,
they're investigating a dream. So that was actually my first memory of reading a Batman comic book issue. Yeah.
wow, wow.
So all of my reading has been very retroactive. I've gone back and read Year One. I've gone back and read the Dark Knight. I've gone back and read Long Halloween and Dark Victory and yeah. I think probably the Loeb and Sale books are super influential, right next to the Miller Mazzucchelli Year One for me.
No, I agree. Those guys, they really when I was younger in my 20s, I was super artsy. And I was like,
Hmm.
what is this ugly stuff of Batman? Tim Sale's art. I know it's heresy now, but now that I'm older, like once I got into my 30s, I was like, wow, I get it. Like this matches the
Yeah,
tone so
yeah.
perfectly.
And
And
it's
I
so
abs
it's so I think people misunderstand good comic book art. I think there's this drive to mirror realism in some way. But I think it makes the comic book medium less because so much is insinuated, much like people love to say this, oh, the comic book story happens in the gutters between panels. It also happens in the absence of realism. It
Mhm.
happens because there is too much ink. It happens because you've used one line to insinuate a face where you might have used 10. And I think that kind of slight abstraction of art is important. And the more we move away from that kind of abstraction, I think the stories feel a little less convincing because you're not doing the work to convince yourself. The book is trying to do it for you, you know.
Wow. That's wow. That's you just said a mouthful with just a few words. There, I'll be thinking about that after later today. I love things like that. There is so much, and I can see the abstract in Raphael's work.
Hmm.
There's like there's a very there's a realism, but it's in that abstract way to where it's like,
Sure.
yes, this is a comic book, and it's also haunting the way he draws it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it matches what you were going for. He to me, it seems like he picked it up perfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's been a really nice experience kind of working with a lot of the artists as well. Just to hear them come up and say, like, oh, I've drawn Batman before, but I've never drawn this kind of Batman before. So that's always been really nice to hear because that's what you want to do. Is I mean, some of these guys have worked, unlike me, have worked for multiple decades in comics. And so I would hope that whenever we collaborate, they still feel like, oh, I'm doing something new. Like I'll always remember Rafa was so happy about trying to emulate the Sergio Topi style in one of the issues that we've done. He was so happy about it. He was so thrilled with it. And I was like, that's what you want. That's what you want your artist, no matter how many Batman books they've done before, you want your artist to be excited to draw the next page every time.
Well, you can tell he definitely had enthusiasm for this, very much so. And when I was reading this, I've read this twice. Last night was the second time. I read it all in one sitting. And as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, wow, Ram is really there's like a poetry to it. Like it's more than just a
Mm.
comic story. There's a level of depth to this that is I don't know, you could just tell like you really wrote this in a way that I haven't read a Batman story before. Like
Mm.
there's a sense of, like I said, poetry. There's a sense of like classical influence. Like I almost thought it was kind of like Batman mixed with Interview with the Vampire and mixed with
Yes.
Sin City too,
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. I mean, that was very much the intent. When I pitched this, I said it's Batman, but it's opera. It's not because I felt quite peeved with the direction that Batman had taken as a comic book character over the past few years. That's not to criticize anyone's work. I think just generally it's a cultural shift. You know, these characters they're cultural manifestations. And so they become whatever society needs them to become. But that saying that would absolve every creator of the responsibility of also to some extent influencing society, right?
Sure.
Um, and so part of this was my reaction to the fact that Batman had become this kind of super soldier figure almost, where the beauty, the poetry, the sort of darkness of it, the tragedy of the character was being lost because it was in service to great, what new tech do I have in the Batmobile? Or like how many bullets can my suit withstand? Or how high can I jump? Or how hard can I hit? And none of those things actually are entertaining. You see what I mean? Like if you look at them outside of context, like none of those things mean anything. What really matters is what memory do I think of when I stand atop this gargoyle and look down on this city that I grew up in? What what sadness do I find lurking in the shadows? What joys am I trying to preserve? Those are the things that are really interesting to at least to me. And I felt like I wanted to create a story that made no qualms about focusing on that element of the character. And to be honest, the roots of that probably lie in the Tim Burton film. The Tim Burton film is films are unabashed in their sort of camp operatic over the top nature, and maybe I'm not quite emulating those, but certainly like recently I was on a podcast discussing the third film, the Penguin film, and I rewatched it for that, and there's two figures outside a power plant holding like these two spanners crossed in an X, and they're carved, beautiful, sort of Greco-Roman statuesque figures, but also very neo-Gothic. They have a sort of modernity to them in the way they're carved as well. And like, where else can you get away with designing a can you get away with designing a set like that for a superhero film today?
Especially not James Gunn Superman. No way, Jose.
So I that kind of aesthetic I missed, and therefore I said, no, we're gonna push and show that Batman can be more than one manifestation. We can be a different kind of character as well. So hopefully we succeeded in doing some of that.
Well, you heard it here. I definitely picked up on the depth of what you were going for, and especially when the when the gal is singing and Bruce is talking to Harvey, I'm like, wow, this makes me think of Sin City. And then the part,
Yeah. My touchstone for that was actually the much maligned season 2 of True Detective,
okay,
where there's I forget her name. I forget the singer's name, but she did a wonderful job. She's singing this very much the same setting. Colin Farrell, I think, and I forget who else is in the season. It's been such a long time now, but it's the same conversation. Sitting in a bar, having a conversation. She's singing in the background. The entire thing feels like something out of a David Lynch film, and so yeah, that's something we were aiming for, certainly.
well, I also thought just a smidge of Jessica Rabbit too. I'm like, oh yeah,
Sure, yeah.
this is like yeah, that too. But mainly what I mentioned, Sin City, an interview with a vampire. Now, excuse me. For me personally, for my taste, I like a more grounded Batman, but I do appreciate your break of realism with this, going for the what is how do you say the organs,
Yeah.
right? And for me personally, there's a very fine line between having Batman with monsters and then like completely, jumping the shark, no matter how dark you try to make it. And I felt like you rode that line perfectly in this volume. Because if you went too far, I'd be like, Batman fighting monsters. Come on, man. But
Yeah.
you were right down the middle to where you held my attention, and I was like, okay, I can jam with this. So
Yeah, I think that's kind of pushing the boundaries of what your character can be, right? Like part of the reason these characters have lasted so long is because they're very malleable. As long as there's a balance between make them being malleable is only true as long as they're believable. If they're no longer believable, then you've broken the character. You've kind of broken the wire and trying to bend it. And so I think that's always a balance, regardless of what character you write. And I think, if anything, people forgot Batman could be that kind of character as well. And so it was very much, again, an endeavor to push Batman into interesting territory in that way. The Orgums are certainly not monsters, but they're monstrous. And I think, and I think, you know, playing that card and playing that angle is quite nice. You know, Batman's fighting a werewolf, which, you know, without context feels like it might be too much. But when Batman looks at him, he goes, "Oh, you're kind of you're infected by some sort of virus that reacts to silver, one that I haven't seen in ages, huh?" So there even Batman within the story is trying to grapple with the unreal nature of his foes.
well, with that, and also the everybody says it different. Bar Barbados, Barbatos. You broke up this.
Barbatos.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that how you thought of it?
I suppose
Barbatos?
because
Because
the
you broke up the
I actually
syllables.
said Barbados before, but it sounds like the country Barbados
Yeah,
rather than so I imagine it's Barbados.
Barbatos. Now I dug that part too because Batman's, if you had done that before Scott Snyder did Dark Knight's Metal with Barbatos, that would have
Hmm.
been a jump. But because
Hmm.
that lore was already established for me, I bought the fact that Barbatos was in it, and Bruce is having this like hallucinating dream of the Bat Demon from long ago taking, being a part of his soul and his spirit. So I thought that was
Yeah,
very clever
and
too.
like I don't want to take credit for it because that version originally he was always created like that, like this kind of demon attached to Batman. Because the original creation, I believe, is Peter Milligan, and he was later used by Grant Morrison. So and I know Scott used him as this kind of Batman for all time, big dragon demon creature, and so I had all of that sort of history to take from. So that is not a reinvention by any means. It's probably more a return to form in terms of how he was originally created.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. But nonetheless, I felt like you picked up on the strings of that character that at least what I
Yeah, he
knew.
certainly he certainly didn't talk in rhymes or sound like an opera villain in any of those books. So that was very much part of my endeavor.
Yeah. And it didn't go too far to where it's like, oh boy, all right, we're doing a werewolf. We're doing it. All right. Now we got this bat
Yeah,
thing. Oh, no, you blended it all seamlessly. And it was very,
thank you.
excuse me. No, thank you. I'm very grateful that you were able to do that because not everyone can tie all those things together. It could be too choppy, too segmented. So that was an excellent job, and
I
I
mean,
look
I
forward.
think I think it's important. I think the way you do that is you can actually get away with pushing as far as you want to push as long as you're making sure that your story is laser focused on human character beats and emotions, right?
Mhm.
Because yeah, you can be watching vampires and werewolves going at it, but really what you really care about is why are they this way? Why do they make the choices they make? What are they driven by? And as long as that feels relatable and down to earth, then you can pretty much take liberties with other things as long as you're focused on keeping the characters human and feeling human.
Well, you crushed it, man. So great job.
Thank you.
W
Yeah.
with regards to writing Batman, is there a particular room you sit in, or desk, or ambiance that you have going on?
No, it's mostly just here. I'm at my
Just there?
desk. Um, I mean, to be fair, when I started the run, I was in my previous home, and I had a proper office there. This is just a corner of the living room because we're only halfway moved in here. But um, no, it's usually me at my desk, and even weirder, I write from busy cafes. Like I'll go to a Starbucks and write from a Starbucks more than writing from like an actually nice, maybe like quieter Italian cafe or something like that. I kind of need the white noise of people moving around that I can ignore
Okay.
when I'm working. So no, it's all the atmosphere is all in my head.
Okay. Because I'm imagining like, you got your like artists have that bendable light. You got
Yeah.
that. It's dark around you. Maybe you have a nice Chianti there as well. And you're writing, and maybe you've got a little bit of piano music in the background.
I
And
wish, I wish, I wish things were that romantic. No, it's
uh,
just probably the most interesting thing in terms of building atmosphere is I've got a tiny little mini projector that I will use to project random interesting images from the internet
okay.
um, onto my ceiling or onto my wall when I'm writing, just so when my brain goes, I can't think of what comes next. Instead of staring at a blank wall, I'm staring at things that are interesting on a wall. And usually that will spur something on.
No, that's super cool, man. That's super cool. I don't think I've ever heard anybody do that before. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. It wasn't. intentional. I found this kind of online web page that just streams interesting visual images from the internet 24/7. I was like, huh, that would be pretty cool if I projected that onto a wall and then I used it as a writing aid, I suppose.
That's cool. That's cool. Because I've seen on YouTube they have like they have music like from every Batman movie or video
Yeah.
game, the ambiance, so you can get in the Batman mode if you wanted to. I've seen
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, I've played my share of the Danny Elfman theme, or I used, soundtracks from the Dark Knight trilogy, or I used soundtracks from Dune even. To yeah, Hans Zimmer is pretty safe bet when it comes to to good cinematic soundtracks, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, and you seem like a guy who's fully indulgent in that when you do choose to do it. Like, yes, turn it up, turn it up.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm a big music lover. I play guitar as well, and music and writing for me have always had a connection. So yeah, I do have a Detective Comics playlist on somewhere on Spotify. People
Well,
keep asking me to share it. I'm like, but my taste is weird, and I'm not sure I want everyone to know.
well, you've got the hair. You just said you play guitar and you go to Starbucks, so you are officially a hipster, sir.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I've always been one.
Yeah, yeah. See that the hair like hinted at it very, very much so, but then those two other things definitely, especially the Starbucks thing. Yeah. Well done. Well done.
Perfect. Yeah. Actually, Starbucks thing is a guilty pleasure. I have no idea why I prefer it over so many other better places, but I think frankly, like it's they will leave me alone because they want me to. I'll go into like nice Italian cafes, and then somewhere around hour 4, you'll start getting people going like, "Can we help you with anything else? Do you want another coffee? Are you just gonna sit here for the next 3 more hours
You're
that
like,
we're
listen,
open?"
Batman's on a gargoyle right now. I
Yeah,
need space. I
exactly.
need
And I
space.
can't, but I can't even tell them that because I can't tell them like I'm writing like DC comic stuff. So yeah, it's just weird. Whereas Starbucks, like nobody cares. Nobody cares that I'm sat at the corner of some table working on something. Yeah.
Well,
The
there's
only time people care is when I have art open on the computer, and then occasionally someone will be like, "What is that?" But yeah.
well, I eavesdrop on people. There's a couple of places. There's a Starbucks nearby. There's a couple of places like a Starbucks, like these hipster like college things where people go with their laptops and their iPads with the keyboard. And when I'm waiting online, they'll be like right here at a table, and I'll be looking at the screen trying to understand what's going on. And it's usually like all these complicated calculus and other things going on. So I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah, yeah, spreadsheets. And then because I'm looking for someone like yourself, I want to see something cool like Batman or Spider-Man goes into the room. Like I want to see if I'm stumbling on anybody who's into that. So
I collaborated on an early comic once with some random illustrator I met in a coffee shop. And we ended up becoming friends after, but totally out of the blue. He's just sat there drawing on a Cintiq. I'm sat across the table from him typing away. I look at him, go like, "Oh, you're an illustrator?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah." I'm like, "I'll write some scripts." Boom, collaboration. Made a comic, 7 pages long.
that's awesome. That's awesome. But that's how it's done. That's I'm waiting for my time to shine, because I like to
Do it.
draw.
Yeah, it takes such. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it takes such little effort to start, making comics.
That's
It's
true.
probably like the lowest barrier to entry of any sort of visual narrative medium.
And all you have to do is get published. And that's like huge.
You don't even need to get published. You can just, I mean, my first 7 pages, all I put them on the internet. That's it.
Right. That yeah, I've heard many
They,
people mention that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, they just kind of sat there. People looked at them. They were like, "Oh, that's cool." Um, so you don't even. I think getting published is many steps down the line. My advice would be first write every day. It doesn't even have to be a comic, but write every day. And then my second step would be write a script for yourself. Don't have to have it drawn, but just write a script. And third step, probably find an artist who will draw a script for you. Make those pages. Finish a story, 5-page story. Finish it start to end. Write your ending, and then you've got a thing. If you've gotten that far, you'll get published at some point as long as you're persistent. You keep doing it.
Wow. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It was your what you just said was just very clean. Just do it. Just do it, and eventually it'll happen. And you know what? In life, I found that's very true. There's certain things that I wanted to do, and as I pursued them, like things just happened, and then I fell into certain things that I was really into, and I was like, wow. So,
Yeah, and you know, I feel like when I was first starting out, I wanted to be that guy giving that sort of how do you break into comics advice,
and
and
then you
then you
take your hair
realize
and
about
pull it back,
no,
and
and then you realize about 3 years on that everyone just keeps asking you the same question: how do you break into comic? And I think at this point, like if you drop all pretension from it, honestly, just focus on the work. It's not about breaking into comics. It's about being a good writer. The comics happens to be a medium that I'm writing in. If you're really focused on being a good storyteller, you will work across mediums. You will understand how to use mediums to their fullest potential. Um, so yeah, I mean, dropping all pretension, like you want to be a good writer. I followed Ray Bradbury's advice, where he said, write a short story every week. Start on Monday, finish on Saturday. Every week. Start a new story on Monday, and you have to finish on Saturday. Doesn't matter how many words long, 500, 5,000, no one cares. And he said, do that every week for a year. And then I love this line. He goes, I have never met a writer worth their salt who could write 52 bad short stories, which is so lovely. Yeah, if you just do it enough, you will end up with a story that's got something, you know?
I
And then
appreciate that.
you will know that, oh yeah, I made a thing and it worked, and you'll know why it worked because you can see the 51 times it didn't work.
I appreciate that. I feel like I feel that way in doing this channel. We've been doing this for about a little over a year. And the first time we had someone
Mhm.
on, I was like, oh my God, I need to write down all these things. Whereas now I just knew things, I know things that I want to talk about and beats I want to hit, and I just shoot from the hip. So I'd like
Yeah.
to think that my interviewing has gotten better as well when I watch myself on here. So, but I definitely appreciate that. And
Yeah,
it's very
yeah, no,
true.
I think so. I appreciate conversational interviews way more than, you know, someone reading out a question they've written beforehand, because I don't know, it
Why do
kind
you
of
like
feels
Batman? What's your favorite Batman?
my
Do you like
favorite.
that? No, but like
Oh,
that.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, the worst one is if you could write any character at DC or Marvel, which one would you write? And my response to that is, but I literally can. I can write any character at DC or Marvel. So if I wanted to write one, I would pitch it, not talk about it on an interview.
Right. Well, I appreciate that because and you know what? I feel a little smarter because I didn't even think of that question.
Yeah,
So I'm like, all
perfect.
right,
Good.
I'm on the right path. I'm on the right path. So as regards that though, with do you have any, for instance, are do you like say get a Spider-Man story in your brain and you write it down for when you may have an opportunity and just touch it up like over the years from when your chance comes? Do you do that or do you just work as it comes?
No, I usually get stories before I get characters. Like it's weird. Like I didn't have a Batman story. All I knew was like, I want to make something operatic with Batman in it. Um, and that kind of led into what Detective is now. With the upcoming New God stuff, I know I want to do the sort of Hindu end of the world myth, but with DCU characters in it. And then when my brain did that, it went like, oh yeah, of course, this has to be a Do God story. Um, and so sometimes I'll get stories, um, and I don't know what character works for it. And sometimes that will come much later down the line, which is why some of my pitches, the editors are probably like scratching their heads, going like, why is he pitching this character that no one reads? Because they don't understand, like, I don't care how big or small the character is. I've got a story that's interesting. Um, and so that has always been my approach. I always get the story first.
I find that
Um,
fascinating because
yeah.
most times I would think like you would and I don't know this, but my assumption is, at least in my brain, is like, oh, I have a Batman story or a Spider-Man story or a Nightwing story or a Superman story, not I have a great story and then assimilate it around this particular character. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it lets you, I mean, just in how you approach it, it lets you be less precious about reinventing a character, because your character is now an icon that you can mold in whatever shape you need him to be to tell a good story. Whereas if you look at the character as the thing that the story is in service of, then you're kind of writing for a statue.
Right.
It doesn't change anymore. It's ossified. It's become an object that defines your story. Whereas the greatest Batman stories are creators coming in and having a great story to tell and molding Batman to fit that. Like Frank Miller's Batman is a Batman molded to fit a story that Frank Miller wanted to tell. Grant Morrison's Batman is a very different Batman molded to fit a story that he wanted to tell. And so that's how I think these characters have longevity. The more we start becoming people who are like, oh, I want to write a Batman story, that means you're only ever going to write the same Batman that you read, that you fell in love with in your story.
In every one of my Batman stories, he does the same spin kick. And
Dun
I
dun
wonder if
dun.
it gets boring. Yeah, yeah.
My no, actually, my favorite Batman shtick is the someone's talking to me, they look up and I'm gone.
Yeah, oh, I love that
I
too.
love doing that. I
Yes.
love it. I used it, in fact, in a Gordon and
Yeah, you
Batman
used it in here.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no,
And I
no,
will.
dude, you used it even with the doctor, which I thought was
Yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah,
thought
I used
I
it.
thought that was awesome because he does it with Gordon, but he did it to the guy, and he was Bruce Wayne. He wasn't even Batman.
Yeah.
Now, and speaking of that, because that rings a bell, because I was fascinated. You highlighted the spinal injury, which was, of course, Bane, and then you had like
Yeah.
the broken finger. Was that from a particular story? And then like on the skull here, did you pick from stories that you were inspired by? Like, yeah, that
No,
happened.
not really. I imagine he's broken pretty much every bone there is to break and heal in his body, but at this point anyway. So,
Okay, because I thought that was fascinating. I'm like, oh, that first one, that's Bane. Bane
but
broke his
but
back.
that's yeah. That's
Got
see,
it.
that's great
Yeah,
because you can do things, and because of the long storied history of this character, everything has more meaning than it does when it's once it's on paper.
yeah, that was super clever. That was super clever. I loved it. And then in that interaction, when he's talking to him about his body, my brain immediately went to the Dark Knight Rises trailer. Where the
Uh-huh.
guy's like, hella skiing. No, Mr. Wayne, you're missing cartilage and all this. And that reminded me of that scene from.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder if Ram was thinking about that from this.
Yeah, very much, very much. Like all my influences are super contemporary, so yes,
Okay. Now I've had you for almost an hour. I don't want to be unkind about your time, but I do have some more
no
questions
problem.
because
Sure.
I'm really enjoying your company. So thank you.
My
Um,
pleasure.
and thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. With regards to how you write a script, do you write like like full page, like Batman? It's nighttime. There's three windows in the building. He's on a gargoyle looking down. Or do you just kind of like how do you do your scripts?
No, they're pretty detailed when I write them. Um, I know they're not crazy Alan Moore level of I'm writing an essay on every page detail,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
sometimes they are.
yeah.
On some pages they are. As I suspect, Alan Moore scripts were not always like that, but sometimes they were. And I think it's when I have a specific idea of how something looks like what something looks like on the page. And so largely when I need to transmit that amount of detail, it's because I'm trying to do something very specific. Um, when I don't, I'm also equally good at just going like, do whatever you want. It's 4 pages of Batman punching this guy. Go for it. Um, and this is all the dialogue that we will layer over it. And sometimes you'll get something back that surprises you and is lovely, and you will change your dialogue or script to fit what the artist has done as well. And so you have to be, I want to be open for that kind of opportunity as well. So uh yeah, I think a lot about where I'm going to be almost prescriptive and where I'm totally cool with like they fight one line, go for it, you know.
That's awesome. I'm sure that's really appreciated too. 'Cause the artist's like, all right, cool.
Yeah, and I don't like working in a scenario where it feels like you're in a conveyor belt where I write the script on my own and then that goes to the artist and then I only talk to the artist once he started doing pages or she started doing pages. That doesn't quite work for me. So usually I'm the kind of annoying guy who'll be like on a Saturday morning, be like, "Can you take a half an hour to sit down on a Zoom call with me and chat?" And I want to know what you love drawing or how you love drawing things or what your process is, and because my script will change depending on who I'm working with.
That's
Um,
important. That's really important.
yeah, I believe making comics or any collaborative endeavor is very similar to being in a band. You can't you can't just record your track and send it over to someone and expect you're gonna sound great. You have to play with each other. You have to listen to each other. You have to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and then you start sounding like a band that's making a song rather than four sort of musicians playing together. So
That's interesting. You made the band reference. I believe it. We had Jason Fabic on, and he said the same thing. It's like I believe it was him. He said it was like being in a band, playing music
yeah,
together. Because we were talking about the artist and the colorist.
yeah.
Here we're talking about the writer and the artist. So
Yeah. I think it's true of almost any creative endeavor.
okay, what now? Speaking of creative endeavor, you're taking on a big creative endeavor. How did the New Gods come about? You had a story and then you went to the DC and they're like, "Oh, great, we'll mesh it into All In," or how did that all?
It was so far away from All In when it first started out. It was like 3 years before anyone was even talking about All In. Um, I was at San Diego 3 years ago, and the then editor-in-chief, Ben Abernathy, and I were having breakfast. And I think it was my first, I was just starting my detective run. Um, and I was getting close to the end of my Swamp Thing run. And so he was like, what do you want to do next? Maybe half partway through your detective run or after your detective run, what do you want to do? And I think at the time I was like, I think I want to do something obscure, something with characters people haven't seen in a while. Because that to me is a logical place to go. You do one of this, which is big character, Batman, everybody knows him, everybody loves him. And then you have to turn around and do something else. You can't just keep doing the same kind of thing over and over. So I went, there's only one place I want to turn to after Detective, which is I want to do some reinvention, some obscure characters that haven't been around for a while. And I said I had this big mythological idea. And I always felt a little bit disappointed by the fact that it felt like the New Gods had always been in the periphery of whatever was happening with the DCU. I mean, sometimes characters crossed over. There was, Darkseid came over, and big bad guy Orion was there here every now and then, but it never felt like the New God stuff was happening in the same place as the DC stuff.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Very much so.
with this story, the Endeavor is very much like, nope, they are happening smack in the same place, and they're going to collide, and people are going to have to contend with the fact that there are these new gods, almost demigod-esque characters, probably more powerful than your average superhero in some ways. But they have their own trauma, their own baggage, and now we have to deal with all of it because all of those things have sort of gotten entangled, and I think that's very exciting to me. This idea that DC main continuity and the New God stuff is colliding and happening in the same narrative, and that's really what helped tie it into All In. When the time came, they were like, look, you're doing this New God story and it collides with the DCU, and we're doing this big DC All-In event thing. Why don't we put those two things together, and can we find a way for the event to influence the New Gods book, but also for New Gods to have consequences within the event?
That's
And that's
awesome.
how that conversation got started.
That's awesome, because I wanted to know about that. Is it playing in the same? Do they play off of each other to where it's like you said? It's not like they're on the periphery having their own thing, and then maybe Orion shows
I
up or
mean,
something.
yeah. So first 3 or 4 issues, you're like, oh yeah, this is a New Gods book. I think about around issue 4, you're like, oh no, wait, this is a proper DCU book, because stuff happens, exciting stuff happens, that rings a bell that cannot be unrung, if you will. So yeah.
That makes me think of Batman versus Superman, the end of it. Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah,
ding,
yeah,
ding, 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 ding.
yeah.
All right. Now, watching you just now explain that, you were so excited. Like, I'm excited. When I send you the link for this, please watch it. To see your excitement, I'm digging it, man. Like, you're so into this that I'm into it because
I'm always into this. Like, I love stories. I genuinely love them.
no, but
And yeah,
about the New Gods though, like
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't I've been reading comics since the early 90s. And golly, I can't even remember an ongoing New Gods series. Can you? Do you remember that from your childhood at all, or
No, I didn't even
uh,
read them as a kid. I read them because, so this is my pathway into New Gods. I read Sandman, was my first intro to anything DC related.
dude, Sandman is so you though. Just talking to you in this conversation, Sandman is so you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I found Sandman, then I found Neil Gaiman, and I read all of his work. And then I read somewhere that a writer called Alan Moore had recommended Neil Gaiman to Karen Berger when she was editing Vertigo. So I wonder who Alan Moore is. So I went back and read a lot of what Alan Moore had done. Then I found this piece that said Grant, young upcoming British writer, criticizes Alan Moore's work in Wizard magazine. I was like, who is this guy? I was like, oh, Grant Morrison. Okay, great. I'm going to read some Grant Morrison work. So I read everything he had done. And by that time, because I'd read everything Grant had done, I was like, oh, he loves New God stuff. There's so much DC multiverse in here. There's Seven Soldiers and Mr. Miracle. And that was really my sort of, and obviously Darkseid and Final Crisis and all of that. So that was really my intro to New God stuff. And then later on, I found that Alan Moore got into writing comics because he was inspired by what Kirby was doing with the New God stuff, with the Eternal stuff. And I went like, oh, wonder, I had never tried to read Jack Kirby. I should go and read some Jack Kirby. So I got the whole Fourth World omnibus. I read the whole thing. And I understood why writers that I really admired and whose work I had loved had seen this thing and gone, their brains had just gone like, I can do a million things. Because it genuinely is like that. It is just bursting with ideas. even if I would say Kirby didn't explore maybe 80% of them with any kind of depth. But as a writer who loves depth, I can totally see someone looking at that go like, every page in this can be a new story. What's going on? And so that's how it felt to me reading it. And that's part of the reason I got excited about it. So
Wow. That's so cool, man. As you're talking, it happened to me. It happened in my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. I think I hear the next like crisis level writer. Like maybe it'll be you. You know, like Grant did that wild and out there Final Crisis. Maybe you get the next one. So
who knows? Who knows? I love telling stories, big or small. Whatever comes my way, we will tackle it when it gets here.
well, okay. I love that. And the enthusiasm is like dripping off of you as you're talking about stories. I love it, man. Like you're genuinely getting me excited for New Gods. I was intrigued and I was like,
Sure.
huh, interesting. And then when I read the first volume of Detective with the way you went about that, I'm like, all right, I could see Ram writing New Gods and making it interesting. But now seeing how enthusiastic you are about it, I'm all
It's
in on
gonna
that.
it's gonna be wild.
Hey,
So
hey,
yeah,
I'm
all in. Dun
all in on
dun
that.
dun.
Now, as we
On brand.
on brand,
But
that's right,
Head
all
and
in,
Shoulders
head
and
and
DC
shoulders. All,
and DC, both of them should be thanking you.
dude, we're all in. We're so in. We're head and shoulders in. How's that? But
Oh, perfect.
hey,
Done.
now as regards the level of this or the length of the story. So, and I, if you can't tell me whatever, I won't. I'll be like, okay, I get it.
Are we still talking about New Gods?
Yes, we are still
Yeah.
talking about New Gods. So, firstly, is there a minimum that they're going to give you to see if it touches a chord with sales, like 12 issues or 20 issues? Do you have any sort of
I mean,
like
it's slated to be an ongoing.
right?
Um, but I imagine if it bombs in 12 issues, I suspect they will not want to give me another 12.
Okay.
So it better do well, but for all practical purposes, it's an ongoing. And so the story we're designing certainly extends beyond 1 year, if you will.
Okay. 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 All right. Yeah, because that was my next question. Is there like a 12 issue arc that you have ready to
There's a
wrap up
12 issue arc, and
with
it
it with an
marks
ending? With a maybe ending or like a tease or
it's a 12 issue arc that feels like it brings things full circle,
okay.
but the ending is something that feels like a step one for new gods and their new status quo, and perhaps even a new god. So we shall see.
Okay. Maybe a new god. There we go.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what is that's like a double entendre, a new god. Hey,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had the beauty of that cadence is not lost on me. You will see in issue one.
well, is issue one going to have any like cool gimmick covers? Like, because when I think of new gods, I think it would be awesome if there was a foil cover that, like, when you turned it in the light, you saw like the things glisten
Oh,
and all
foil
that.
cover. That's not a gimmick anymore. You get foil covers all the time.
Dude, no, 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 no,
We've
no.
got we've got some proper gimmick covers. Like
We
if you think foil's a gimmick, wait until you see what we're doing.
I am so excited because I remember being like a complete sucker with a lollipop at like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, it's a gimmick cover. It'd be like plastic or like,
No, see, so I actually dislike gimmicks, right? I don't like gimmicks because by definition, they don't mean anything outside of what they are. Cool, it's
right.
a foil cover. Why is it a foil cover? Well, it's shiny. Great. But a foil cover that does something for the narrative, now that's no longer a gimmick. That's something really cool.
See, but I'm thinking
So
like New Gods foil cover, like Kirby-esque would be perfect.
so we're doing something. They're
Okay.
not foil covers.
Oh, okay.
I don't think anything like what we're doing has been done
Okay.
before. But we're doing something with the covers that is not a gimmick, in that it is meaningful to the narrative. It
I,
gives you something to do with them. So
okay,
we
okay,
shall see.
I'm gonna throw this out there, and I'm gonna try and read your body language because I know you can't say if I'm right or wrong. But is it like the old school Jim Lee, like fold out X-Men cover? It's like,
No,
no, okay.
no.
That was a pretty
You'll have to
affirmative
you'll have
no.
to see
So
it.
okay, okay.
You'll have to see it. Yeah.
Did you ask for that cover, or were they like, "Hey,
Yes.
we're okay"? Oh, that's
No,
awesome.
no. I went to them and I said, "This is the plan. This is how we do it. This is how it has to be." And they went like, "Can we even do this?" And then somebody in the dark corners of some DC office went like, "Yes, we can, Ram." And
Hmm.
then we made it happen.
That's awesome. I am so excited. I am so excited. Is there an on sale date for it yet? Or
No, no, it's not even the catalog yet because
okay.
it's slated for December, so it will
Oh,
only be
December.
in the
Okay.
solicits shortly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. See, I was thinking September because that's when the Batman came out, but it comes out in
No, it
December.
comes out in December. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm even more excited. I want to see what this is. I want to see what this is.
You will, yeah.
So,
They will be they're very limited gimmicks though, from what I hear. So
so
when I will give you a heads up when it comes out. If you want one,
I would
you're gonna have to
absolutely,
like
dude,
strangle someone.
I would absolutely love if you DM'd me or emailed me when it goes on sale. And I swear to you, I will not tell another soul.
Great.
And I'll keep it to myself. I promise.
Will
That's
do.
so awesome. That's so exciting. I'm really excited for that. When it comes and I appreciate you dropping that because seeing how excited you are makes me more excited. So when it comes to the overall
Mhm.
New Gods, though, is there a particular character that is like your central character in it, and everybody vibes off him or her, or how is that playing out?
No, there are a few central characters. Because there are a few narrative threads that we'll be pulling at. Um, I think Orion and Mr. Miracle kind of form a duo of central characters that the narrative revolves around their relationship, the fact that they're brothers,
Are they
and
standoffish though, like or
yeah, a little bit. They at least they start off as uncomfortably distant brothers.
okay, cool.
Um,
I could see that. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And you know, all of that will lay the groundwork in issue one. Issue one, you will know what the status quo of that relationship is. Um, and then obviously there's dramatic reasons for them to try and overcome that. So we'll see that. So that's one corner of the narrative. Then there are things happening on New Genesis and Apocalypse that will center around pivotal characters there. So High Father is one. And I won't spoil the status quo on Apocalypse, so you'll have to see when you get there. And then also because Orion's kind of been jaunting through space and earthbound for a while, largely New Genesis's championing has been taken up by Light Ray. And what a difficult position to be in, to be this joyous, wonderful, amazingly positive champion of New Genesis, and yet always be in the shadow of Orion, who everyone immediately recognizes as the true champion of New Genesis. And so there is that sort of relationship and that sort of, when will I be recognized for the things that I have done, sort of feeling there. So that becomes a cornerstone of the narrative. And then, of course, about close to halfway through, that narrative and the DC mainline narrative collides. And so there are some DC heroes, Wonder Woman, Superman, some DC villains who will play some pretty pivotal roles as well. And so, yeah, so it's going to be a roving perspective, and all of these characters are going to get their get their time to shine, and perhaps even some characters that are entirely original and we haven't seen before.
like a new god.
Oh yeah.
But we digress. I tell you, I love storytelling like that, especially in episodic television when there's a main thread and then there's these
Yeah.
offshoots. And then, by the season finale, they all kind of tie together and get figured out in some way.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that.
I
I
mean,
love
I
that.
also love designing stuff like that where you can't quite tell what is the main thread. Um, Not in that you can't tell what the thrust of your story is,
Sure.
but you can't quite tell who is important or who isn't important or who's going to become
Ah,
important.
okay.
And
That's even cooler.
who's gonna die first and who's gonna be reborn first, all of those things. I love for a story to feel like it's so big that you couldn't possibly encapsulate it within your own narrative sort of box, if you will. But somehow, as you go past the midpoint and get towards the end, you realize, oh wait, it's all coming together in this interesting, dramatic way. So
I certainly hope that it gets a hardcover whenever the collected edition for the first volume.
sure.
And
I mean, I've just talked to DC about collecting potentially hardcovers for my Swamp Thing run and
yeah, this trade
for
paperback stuff, I understand it's cheaper, but it's not cool because I'm a hardcover addict, and then I got,
Yeah, yeah.
you know what
So
I mean?
so you will be happy to know that Detective is certainly Gotham Nocturne is certainly getting a contained hardcover treatment. So
Very nice. Well
yeah,
deserved
yeah.
too. Maybe your new gods will get an absolute edition too. That would be awesome.
Maybe
I
we'll see.
love my heart belongs to the absolute edition. I love
I
them.
mean, also like I think those absolute editions, because they're correct me if I'm wrong, but they're also like bigger in size, right?
Yeah, they're like king sized and
Yeah, yeah.
they're yeah.
And so I think Evan's art, if for no other reason, I think Evan's art certainly deserves that sort of look at this and have your breath stolen by the art
That was my
kind of
next
treatment.
question.
Yeah.
What's his full name? What's the artist's full name?
Evan Kagel.
Kindle?
Kagel.
Kagel,
Yeah.
Evan Kagel. Okay. I'm not familiar. Maybe I've stumbled on it before, but I look forward to what he has in store. The picture that they show for your story, is that the cover or is that just a solicitation for the one that's been bandied about online?
That's the Pete Woods cover. I think Pete Woods did that one.
Okay.
That's not Evan's work.
Okay.
Evan's work will come out shortly as a cover,
All
but
right.
and I'm very excited for people to see it as well. But Pete Woods, who had previously worked on a New Gods book, very kindly agreed to do a cover when we were getting ready to announce this book because Evan had not finished with his previous commitments yet, and we knew Evan wanted to do variants and not necessarily one of the main covers. So yeah, so that one's is a Pete Woods cover, um, but it certainly takes elements from the narrative. So you've got the source wall kind of titans behind him, all pointing into the distance and screaming for
I
some
also
reason.
love the angle of of Orion.
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's very evocative and there's a lot of energy in that. So
yeah. It's this lovely low angle shot of people pointing into the distance,
yeah,
very
yeah,
dramatic
I
to
love
look
that.
at. Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. That was awesome. And as regards when the story wraps up, or at least the first arc, that'll tie is can you say if that's going to tie into like a bigger event, or will a bigger event take place naturally at that after the first, story you tell?
I I think you will have to jump in and read all in to figure that out.
Salesman.
The
You're
bigger
a
event,
salesman.
obviously, yeah, but the bigger event obviously also involves a bunch of other books, as it should, and so I would be, um, yeah, I would be remiss if I said anything here rather than let people discover how
Fair
and
enough.
where things are going. Yeah.
Fair enough. And with regards to what Tom King did with Mr. Miracle, are you going to touch on it? Is any of that trauma going to carry over into your story and be discussed, or is that just its own thing? Can you say?
I think Tom intended that to be its own thing.
Okay.
And uh I also feel like I never particularly, I'm not a canon kind of guy. I'm not someone who's like, this happened here and therefore it has to be. No, no, I'm a world mythology kind of guy. Depends on what era and what age you're reading things from. Zeus is someone's father. And then, 20 years down the line, hey, that guy's his brother now. And he's not a father anymore. And so mythology is full of these sort of contradictions. So I'm not a big believer in like there's one canon and it has to be followed. So I take bits and pieces from everywhere. I take pieces of characterization, I take pieces of narrative thrust. Those are the kind of things I'm interested in taking from other people's work. Less interested in what is the history on record for these characters kind of thing. The
But
history is whatever makes a story more interesting.
yeah, you can cherry pick the finer points
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and bring that in. All right, I appreciate that.
yeah.
I'm a big continuity buff, but I don't know what happened in volume 1 or volume 3 in 1979 or anything. So,
Yeah, I mean, but that's what I mean. Like people love superhero books because I think they're contemporary mythology.
mhm.
And when you love something so much, you can certainly be close enough to be like, no, this is continuity. But if you actually go and read actual world mythology, continuity is a fool's game, is a futile aspect to even try to maintain it because things change over time. Things are interpreted differently over time. So
Dude, that's so
continuity is a lovely concept.
yes. It's like a tree with apples. You can pick your favorite flavor that particular day. Yeah.
Also, it's a magical fictional tree with magic apples.
That's, you know what? That's true. Some people like, how could he do that? It's like, dude, like this is a make believe that this guy can fly and shoot lasers out of his eyes. It's not real. Take a chill pill. So yeah. Now, just last thing, out of curiosity, because you have such a depth and an insight with story, and it's always like on the consciousness somehow. Um, and I mentioned it before real quick. When it comes to a complex layered movie like Batman versus Superman, do you understand what the writer was going for, or are you like, this just doesn't work? Like, how do you feel about
I haven't
movies?
watched it.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I haven't watched it. I'm not the biggest. I,
You're not
I
a
love creators. I follow creators,
movie.
and I've watched a lot of the early Zack Snyder stuff and never did anything for me. I thought then I wasn't particularly enamored with 300. I wasn't particularly enamored with, I think he did a film called Sucker Punch for that. And so it wasn't something that I ever felt like was my cup of tea. And so
Gotcha.
um but Chris Nolan did Batman movies. I'm gonna watch those Batman movies. Tim Burton did a Batman movie. I watched it. I'd watched Edward Scissorhands long before I watched Batman. Um, so yeah, I think I tend to know. It's not often that I have been surprised by creators who I haven't particularly liked after I've seen the first three, four things that they did. So yeah, I never watched almost any of the Snyder stuff.
Interesting. Okay. I'm surprised by that. I am very much surprised by that, but I can understand your reasoning at the same time. Okay. Because that's a movie that when I
Yeah,
saw
like
it,
like
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I watch things for the things that I enjoy in them, and I've always found like Snyder's always been this sort of visually grand, sort of super interesting, dynamic, amazing director. I always kind of found the story moments really wanting,
Sure.
and so I've never gotten into, even I think probably Sucker Punch is his most dramatically driven story. Um, possibly 300 as well, considering that what came from Frank Miller's original work, and Miller's certainly a very, very established good dramatist. But even those felt to me like they were moving or shying away from the good story bits. I think pretty much everything else started feeling like I don't want to watch. I don't want to watch a visual spectacle for the sake of it. I want to watch something that the spectacle is justified because the story is
Yes.
driving all of it.
Yes. Yes. Me too. I appreciate that. I ask about that movie specifically because there's so much derision. And when I first saw the movie, I thought there was something wrong with me because I didn't like it in the theater. And I'm a huge Batman, I'm a huge DC guy, more so than Marvel. And
Sure.
so when the Ultimate Edition came out in the extra 30 minutes, it was like, okay, I understand more what it was going for. And then in the years since 2016, Snyder has come out on podcasts on YouTube and, like layered some of it what Chris Terrio was going for. And then I've listened to podcasts where fans broke it down by minute. There's like a BBS
Mm.
minute by minute, which is really cool. And there's so much context that's been added to it for me that I enjoy it now. Whereas, like I said, I was like, I don't know what they were going for, but now I appreciate it. And maybe the next time we
Do
talk,
you do you enjoy it now, or do you appreciate it now?
you know what? That's a great question because I appreciate it. I
Yeah,
appreciate it
I
more
think
so than I enjoy it, but I'm
yeah,
still having a good time with it. It's
yeah.
it's not
And
something I can watch all the time. It's
there's
fun.
a lot of stuff like that that I appreciate, but I don't particularly enjoy. Um, and and I think it's important to make that distinction. Like I can appreciate a lot of the sort of technical nous that goes into making a lot of things, but they don't necessarily do anything for me from an enjoyment, from an engagement perspective. Like the film that I enjoyed the most in recent memory was Banshees of Inisherin. Um,
Was that in the
Martin
movie theater?
Martin. Sorry.
Is that like an independent film or was it in the big theaters or?
No, it's a Martin McDonagh movie. And Martin McDonagh is a playwright who did Three Billboards Outside something something. I forget the full name of the movie, but not a superhero film at all. It's about two guys on an island outside of coast of Ireland during the World War, having their own sort of little war.
Was that the one with
Um,
Colin Farrell?
yeah, Colin
Oh,
Farrell.
okay. Got it.
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Got it. Yes.
Um, and I think that kind of film does, you know, orders of magnitude more for me than something that's a huge visual spectacle. The
Sure.
last superhero film that I really enjoyed on the DC side of things was probably the Nolan trilogy. Um, the first movie excited me. The second one I both enjoyed and appreciated for how much went into making it. Third one was okay. And then on the Marvel side, I think the first and the third Iron Man movies, and then the first Captain America movie. No, the second Captain America movie. Um, yeah, those are my superhero movies that I enjoyed. I haven't really seen a lot outside of them.
You just coined a new thing for me, and I'm going to mention this to Scott is appreciate it or enjoy it or both. That's really ingenious. That's like, yeah, did I appreciate it more than I enjoyed it or vice versa? That's a great way to look at the movies. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
it. Thank you. You just,
and I think it's useful to interrogate something that way. Like, why do I enjoy this, even though there's not much to appreciate within it? Versus, I appreciate this so much. Why can't I bring myself to enjoy it?
yes, dude, you rocked my world. You just added to my existence. I am very much going to use that when I watch movies now. Because sometimes
Great.
when I watch like a superhero movie, I try to tell myself, all right, I'm going to detach my geek side and just watch the movie as it is and
Yeah.
see if I still enjoy it that way. So yeah, appreciate versus enjoy. Have you ever seen Collateral with Tom Cruise?
Oh yeah. I'm a big Michael Mann guy.
My man,
So
my man. I just turned my co-pilot Scott onto that, so now we text each other sometimes.
I've watched every piece of Michael Mann film there is to watch. pretty close, if not all of it. I love his instincts as a director. I love his treatments. I love the way he thinks about his movies. I love the pragmatism in his approach as well as the art in it. Yeah, I think very, very interesting filmmaker. Yeah.
Yeah. Collateral, I really enjoy the juxtaposition that goes on in that. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
there's so
Yeah, yeah.
there's
The entire but the entire film is an exercise in juxtaposition. Like
yeah,
when you start thinking about, yes, there's narrative juxtaposition here, one man of high philosophy doing terrible things, and juxtaposed next to a protagonist doing simple things, but one of low philosophy, if you will. Um, who wins? That's a really cool question. But then the entire film is also shot constantly with two characters in frame, one close to you, one far away. So it never feels like you get out of the taxi. You're always in the taxi, regardless of where the film is shot. Um, yeah, just mind blowing when you think of the amount of detail that goes into how he's thought about
very
filming
much
this.
so.
So
I appreciated how in a real twisted way Vincent and Max also bonded during the movie.
yeah,
You
yeah. But
know,
there's some, yes,
yeah, it was
they're opposing forces, but opposing forces that recognize each other's existence. I think that's the whole point. You know, I technically Jamie Foxx's character is someone going through life without recognizing his own existence,
correct.
and is this one encounter with clearly this abhorrent antagonist that drives Fox to recognize that he exists and he is capable of agency and he can act.
Well said. Well
And so
said.
you'd have to question if Jamie Foxx's character would have even been a hero if it hadn't been for how much he was pushed by the presence of this antagonist. So
Yes, yes, yes. That dude, because that always gets me and always strikes me when I think about the movie is he's probably going to kill him at the end of the movie, right? But here he is telling him to stand up to his boss, like
yeah,
you're not liable for the damage. Tell him to stick it up his behind. And
yeah,
then Max is looking at him like, what? Like you got me
yeah.
tied, zip tied to a steering wheel. Now you're sticking up for me? Like, what's going on? I love that. I love
But
that.
it also essentially the movie's telling you to stop being collateral, right? It's
Mm,
great.
you just hit it. You just hit it. I that didn't even occur to me. It's telling the viewer, yeah, don't be collateral. Like, step out. You have a voice. Like the King's speech when he's like, I have a voice. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Awesome, man. Thank you.
yeah,
You
yeah.
you you enriched
Great,
my
great.
existence.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. Much more interesting conversation than what character would I write.
Yeah. Do you like Batman? What's your favorite Batman story? What about Superman? So,
What
no,
happened in issue number this? I haven't read
you're like,
it.
what do you mean you don't know that? What's wrong with you? I'm gonna write DC a letter. No, I'm gonna start a
Oh,
petition.
I have enough of those.
Uh,
I have enough people writing letters to DC on my behalf.
well, two more quick things. Please do let me know when that cover is going to come out because I will pick
Will
it up.
do.
And
Will
then
do.
secondly, if I assume when it drops, you're probably going to be on another tour, making another round to promote it. I would love to have you back on and tell you how I enjoyed it.
Can do. Can do.
All right.
We'll figure it out when we get close to when we get just past the release of issue one, I suppose.
All
Yeah,
right.
it'd be great.
Let me know in do you think you'll let me know at like what, the end of November or in December about it? Like when
I think we should, yeah, we should circle back end of November to
end
try
of November.
and
Okay.
put a
So
date. Yeah.
after everybody has their turkey stuff, I'll shoot you a message and be like, hey man, when are you available?
Sounds great.
All
Sounds
right.
great.
Ram, you've been a pleasure. Thank you for giving me so much
Same
time.
here.
I feel
Thank you,
like
Brian.
I talked to a kindred spirit. So thank you for all the insight. Appreciate or enjoyed it. Stop being collateral. Bam.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right.
Anytime you want to talk about Michael Mann, I'm your guy.
Hey, I'm going to take you at your word. You said anytime, so I might hit you up at 1 a.m. Be like, hey, Ram, let's talk. No, I'm just teasing.
I mean, it'll be some ungodly hour here, so I won't even respond to that.
Well, please tell your. I emailed your assistant. How do you say it? Kiara.
She's no longer my assistant because congratulations to her. She's now a full-time editor at Rebellion in 2080. And so, but yes, Kiara, I will convey to
My
Kiara
gratitude.
your gratitude. Will do.
All right.
Will do.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I wish the
Pleasure,
best
Brian.
to you and your family. And yeah,
Same to you.
Thank you, buddy. I'm rooting for you big time. You had me very excited for this. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.